This is the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. Through candid conversations and insightful analysis, we aim to provide a deeper understanding of the political, economic, and social landscape of Africa. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the diverse and dynamic world of African governance.
Hello, my name is Joseph, and you're most welcome to episode 2 of the Policy Digest podcast series. And in the first episode of this series with Public Square, we looked at what Public Square is, and I hope you love the conversation. So we are resuming the conversation to deal with a policy we highlighted in the first episode, which is something that I've taken and I want to quote. Within the Marched Parliament protest, there was rhetoric around how part of the options that were presented on the table dealt with talking to those that are in power in terms of ensuring we can have a moderate outcome out of the Marched Parliament. And members of Public Square kept reiterating the concept of radical non-partisanship. So I wanted to get to them to give us context on that. What exactly is radical non-partisanship, and why did you take that position?
I think I'll take a stab at it first, and Trevor will bring it home. But
Sure.
Our belief, radical non-partisanship comes from the inherent belief that every citizen of this country has a stake in how he's governed, and while they do not agree on ideology and the direction of the country and who their leaders are, it is not our job to put our thumb on the weighing scale and say, you know what, you are expected to vote this way, or we believe this one is terrible, the other one is bad. Our job is just to call, to use a baseball analogy, to call balls and strikes. We shall point out what we think is great in one side and what we think is terrible in the same side. And think about it, think about us the way you would think about the Red Cross in a battle. So
Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah, or Doctors Without Borders or something like that. Imagine you're in the middle of a conflict, and really our politics has started looking like a fierce conflict. Imagine you're in the middle of a conflict and one side is being beaten so badly. Would the moral thing be for a Red Cross staff to pick up the gun and kill a few of the other bad guys who are overly killing these ones? Perhaps not. Their job is to provide refuge to either side and maybe help reduce deaths and stuff like that. So we come at this as a think tank that wants to put forward policies that are pro-Uganda, not pro-partisan political party. We have actually thought about being positioned to review manifestos put together teams that can even review manifestos for all the parties without necessarily, taking a side in this. Does it mean that we are wishy-washy? Perhaps not. Our belief is that the solution for Uganda, at least in the short to medium term, is going to come through reforms, as opposed to some revolutionary leader coming out and, grabbing the country by the scruff of the neck and dragging it into a glorious future. We believe it's going to be a process of painstaking building of compromises on both sides. And I think that Public Square wants to exist in that space where it's a conduit for ideas from all sides of really the Public Square.
Maybe just to still ask about that. So there's conversation around concepts like if you are engaging both parties, they're bad, they're good. At what point in time are you going to deal with the reputation issues, which already I think Public Square is dealing with, where people either, let's say, if you're to overly concentrate on opposition, you're blamed as opposition. At what point in time do you provide a balance?
Please.
I think we have to reframe the conversation, because what you ask is a very important question, but it's only reactionary given our politics. I like to ground this idea in claiming space. From the beginning of how our country was formed, there has been multiple avenues through which people can organize. Political parties are one of those, civil society is another, and religious societies are other groups, sort of like. But the main goal is how people organizing under these groups to make their communities better. We have seen it in Uganda. Multiple political parties have tried to run this territory after it was ceded to us after independence. We have had UPC, we have had DP, Kabakayeka,
UPM,
and now
movement system.
the movement system. And then multi-party democracy, right?
Was too fine.
Yes,
Yeah.
all those contestations have shown that there are limits to what political parties can achieve under our current configuration. Multiple nations crammed within this structure. The way power is contested in these political parties in Uganda, given our history and given what we have observed, has degenerated into, for lack of a better word, discord. And what we are saying is, what other avenues do we have to improve our situations as communities? And I think that's why we turned to this civil society model. Civil society has actually been here alongside these political parties since the country was formed. Like, it's in some sort of form. Even as we were going through our biggest economic transformation, what helped us the most was civil society networks, sort of like stimulating parts of it to revive. And there are criticisms on how that was done, but no, we're in a dire situation, and what helped us at least stay breathing were these civil society networks.
Maybe just to make sure I am reading into your logic right. So you are taking on the position that civil society is non-partisan, and as a result, Public Square has to be partisan.
No. I was answering your question that worrying about reputation only comes in if you don't factor in the history of the limits of the contestation of public good within political parties. So we now know for sure. We now have had enough time to witness the failures of political parties to think deeply about public good as they contest for power. And that's where we want to re-enter this conversation. It doesn't matter what the perception is. I think the challenge is to look at the ideas that are being birthed here, and also our history, to test the validity of them. We know the limits of contesting power in political systems.
Maybe walk us through them, and as you do that, maybe you could try and draw a parallel between why perhaps the pursuit of a non-partisan approach it becomes a legitimate form of organization in situations where what you consider as a failing status quo is prevalent in the status quo.
Political parties are held hostage by the popular views on how politics should be conducted. In a country such as ours, with declining education rates, with cultures that haven't been fully deconstructed, you have a theater of politics that prioritizes the appearance of resistance other than the banal work of public good. Public work is not very interesting as political bait, right? You can have a road you can launch, but it's not like a thing you can do consistently, right? It's banal, and that's the thing. So that's the biggest limit of political parties. And I mean, our shift to multi-party democracy, just at the turn of this century, was premised on the idea that with more political parties, citizens will have more nuanced ways to organize around causes and represent themselves better. But that it has been patently false. We have seen that now the political climate is even more heated than it was when it was a movement system. I would be glad to entertain challenges to that viewpoint. But in 2024, where we stand, we see how polarized political parties
system is.
And the civil society model doesn't need to be reinvented. It does not need to be rebuilt. It exists for the sole purpose of public good. And there are many organizations that have been working on different causes outside politics to some level of impact. So what we are hoping is to intervene within political discourses to tell whoever is participating, doesn't matter from what angle they come at it at, even within civil society themselves, to say, let's think about the things we are doing. Let's reflect them on history. Let's reflect them to the precarity of our present and what is our best possible outcome. Yes, we have a 40-year-old regime. Yes, we have a militarized state. All these things are true. But how do we get out of them? And I'd like your opinion on this. Do you think the kind of partisan contestations can take us out of the governance conundrum we face?
At the moment, and this is bring me to a question I'm about to ask Tony Natif. Normally, within elections, there are different categories of people. There are those who are decided on, I'm going to vote this color, but then there's also what they normally call the undecided. And if you read into the statistics from the last election, there's a huge number of people that are choosing not to participate in their democracy or in even choosing who they elect, which could speak to a declining interest in the politics of the day. And if we are to still link it to the discourse you have, which is, okay, the political climate is too heated, it's a do or die thing rather than who is taking the nation forward, then that pushes a lot of people out of the political discourse. But still, I wanted to still pick your mind. You think that political parties as public square have ceased or are not, should stop being the only legitimate form of political organization for citizenry, and as such you are talking about choosing another approach, which is radical non-partisanship. Maybe walk me through how you understand the political economy that has created this need that public square is trying to push for.
Yeah. That's a very interesting question, and it looks like you paid attention to the stuff we've been preaching.
Oh yeah,
brilliant stuff. That speaks very well of you. And I think Professor Serunkuma, I think this is one of his best works.
Is this a professor?
I think
Doctor,
yes.
Dr. Senkruma.
Yeah.
I'm told that my career for you to
be a professor.
You need first take a white chicken.
Witchcraft. But Dr. Serunkuma, yes, knows what kind of
Dr. Yusuf Serunkuma. One of his best works for me was when he critiqued democracy played out in a partisan way, and said, well, taken to its most effective best, partisan democracy, partisan organizing, underutilizes talent. In a society like ours, where you have a shortage of great talent at leadership level, you cannot afford to pick and choose how you deploy your best talent based off of which party they belong to, or how loudly they sing NRM songs or NUP songs. We have a very small pool of human resource that a country in its nascent stages of development like ours needs to put to work for maximum return. Now, take an example of the legal space. How many people who profess support for, say, Mr. Chagulanyi or Dr. Besigye will make it to the bench, will make it to being a judge or something in this government. But does it mean that they are not talented. So a lot of these talents go unutilized and undeployed because the primary consideration for
It's color.
is color. Like, are you a cadre? So then you have the development of these cadre judges who are there. Yes, they may have some legal knowledge and all that stuff, but they are primarily because they know they'll do no harm to a very partisan system. If there's contestations for elections following, say, some voting, they will know which judges to assign these cases depending on who they want to win. And that's absurd. But it's really the system working normally. So can't we find a way to reset this? If you have, say, a lot of these Western countries are run on bureaucracies that have been at this for hundreds of years. Okay, you find that a British Prime Minister loses an election, a new one is coming in, and it's almost seamless, the transition.
Oh yes, it's like Friday, Monday.
Yeah. So a US president comes into office in January, and beyond just changing a few people at the top, the bureaucracy remains running. You can have a Jerry can run that country.
And the country will still move forward.
And the country will still move forward. So our view is, how do we build, the question we grapple with is, how do we build a robust bureaucracy, a robust firm foundation which can survive political demagoguery?
The ravages.
Yeah.
So is that your other favorite one?
I have a few.
Yes, a few. Yeah, how do we build that? And we can't build that on the foundation of partisanship. The politics will be played
To be a constant.
at that level constantly. But how do you protect the structures of a society from the excesses of politics on either side? And you can only do that from a non-partisan approach. Now, obviously, a lot of people see our radical non-partisanship only from a
partisan viewpoint.
A political partisan viewpoint.
That's the lens from which they perceive it.
Yeah, we're a heavily politicized society.
So everything is then politicized.
Yes, and unfortunately, what informs our politics is very rarely a contestation of national interests that are around a common good. It will be about, we want to be in charge of apportioning resources. So everyone will go like, well, when we get into power, we'll manage the budget. This way, we'll manage the budget. That way, they're fighting for the chance to manage the resources. So, distribute the resources to the people they care about.
So even when they come to power,
yes. So it's a case of you guys have eaten enough. It's our turn now.
And you see it, even I think in local politics, they're like, you have eaten enough, go off, it's now my turn.
And unfortunately,
we have an MP who said this verbatim, okay, RIP, where he said, my first term was for me. Now send me again, and then you can all eat or something like that.
Yeah, so I don't know if in that word salad I've been able to at least come close to answering your question. But we think that contestations in the public space should just go beyond partisanship. And if we don't call that out, we're going to have a problem. Now, look at the most effective governments that President Museveni had. When he came into power, his government had the Mayanja and Kanjis of this world. It had the Semogereres of this world.
Yes.
People that contested the 1980 election with him.
Across the political divide,
It was across the political divide. That was the movement system. Yes, it failed. It was sacrificed at the altar of political partisanship, and it has birthed. It didn't fail. It has
sabotaged.
Yeah, it has birthed the problem that we have now. But really, this is the system working perfectly as it's expected to work. we're going to get into these boxes where we have echo chambers defined by which political color we have.
Oh, by the way, the question of echo chambers, we should get to that. And you find that within those echo chambers, there is no opposition.
Yeah.
People feed themselves on we are right.
Yes, it's a positive reinforcement system of garbage.
Did you just have to do that?
No, but no, in communication.
But that's how an echo chamber
feedback
is,
loops
really. Yeah.
Degenerate.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
The feedback loops degenerate. The more information gets circulated, like the original messaging falls apart, and people are left with rhetoric, and it's garbage.
It's what we run on, rhetoric. When you ask, say, Mr. Chagulanyi, what he wants to do for the economy, or what he wants to do for education, or what he wants to do for healthcare, actually a lot of people will think you're setting him up. Do you understand?
And they will address the concept that you are setting him up.
Yeah, you're setting him up. Hey, you think our president doesn't know about the economy because one time he was asked about this and he gave a long-winded answer that didn't have a lot of substance? No, that's not the purpose. I just want to know what the man wants to do for us. Same thing with President Museveni. I wish people can sit him down and ask him what he wants to do on a certain thing, and we don't go into 1986 revolutionary talk.
We get into the present and how we fix the problems of the day.
These guys have well-defined talking points that appeal to their echo chamber.
Earmarked.
Yes.
And it has become echo chamber fighting another echo chamber rather than
break it down. For the president, this historical exercise in saying, let's look at history. The history of it all. With this guy say, let's not look at history at all. Let's just look at the present. And in this present, we have been unfairly treated, and whatever we do is justified to reverse this situation. And between those two, there is no bridge whatsoever.
Yeah,
no one wants to appreciate where each person is coming from. No common ground, no engagement across argument, symmetry.
Yes. Now, Public Square wants to be one of those organizations that actually says, we see you, we recognize you, we also see you, we recognize you, but also Ugandans at this point. How do we solve their problems?
We don't need more we don't need to radicalize them along line
of parties.
We don't need to radicalize them more because, when you're sick and you're entering Mulago Hospital, they don't care what your political leanings are.
Also, guys, this is the kind of country which you have to teach people how to love. This place is great. That's the thing. No, to be honest, this place is great. This is the kind of country we have to teach people how to love. We just have to deliver public good so that people can sustain their livelihoods in some dignity.
Yes.
And patriotism will be automatic. It's very hard not to love this country. It's really the perfect tropical paradise.
There's a lot of good around,
And you just have to deliver people public good, and they will not sabotage their own chance at living in this territory. Guys have traveled and have tried elsewhere, but they keep coming back.
Yeah.
So we just have to fix that problem of our polarization, because it's true, and it limits how far our discussions on public good can go.
And maybe that's why I wanted to get your mind. There's a political language you've been using around rage farming. I think I read a tweet from you. There's a friend of yours who went to your DM and they had very, very unkind words. I don't know. You have language around rage farming, and for me, there's a problem in the status quo with anyone who disagrees with you. You abuse or you characterize or you how do I call it? There's language you use there. I wanted more context about rage farming and how you think we're able to deal with it. How radical partisanship then deals with that specific idea, because it looks like our political culture and the culture in our political discourse that anyone that you disagree with or that attacks your echo chamber or what you believe in, the response is not to the logic, is not to anything, it is to brand them names and maybe, I'm told, post numbers for people now to text them and, engage them in ways you think should enable them to be cancelled.
I think Trevor has called it the. I'm trying to look for the phrase he used. I think it was it you who called it the gaping chasm of nothingness that everyone is dancing about.
It's true. But before we go, ask really good questions, and I want to give them answers.
Yeah, no.
Because you come in, but before you jump in, there are three things you have to consider. We are now mostly seeing this happen because common structures of political contestation had been silenced. So we're just seeing like some sort of renaissance of political talk after a while of like separation. The medium of the internet carries some burden with it. The problems of harassment are not new to the internet, at least by the time we get in 2024. Because just how to operate in a non-partisan way is to actually agree that other countries have struggled with this to detriments. You saw what happened with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. Sure. So we now know that these platforms can be sabotaged in ways that are damaging to political discourse. And then I think the last point is to remember that also this has compounded, this kind of unease and anxiety has compounded and has gone unaddressed for very long. So for us, you look at it as a social engineering problem, because other countries are struggling with this actively. The States, the EU, with the rise of fascism, X has been called to task on moderation,
on content moderation
and community standards. So Natif is going to jump in, but the answer to that question is it's a social engineering problem, and can also be approached in a non-partisan way to ask ourselves.
Maybe just a follow-up question. I was listening to a podcast, Sit on Free Speech, from Jordan Peterson. And the idea is that let people speak and let the force of public debate be able to deal with those alternative ideas, but at least whether something is right or wrong, let it speak. And I don't know, that still begs a question on whether there's enough alternative force to deal with that, because if majority of people, maybe from their education or from their political alignment, are already radical, which means there is going to be a political balance which does not favor the one who is trying to settle the score.
There's some things we have agreed upon, which we can agree upon, that are harmful and dangerous. With reasonable sharing of that opinion. And like we have seen in our own political contestations, you post and someone say, oh, kill you, it's basically, we can see what harassment is. And a non-partisan way will not be to steer in a kind of way, but to make sure that in the environment which it is being had, there are irreducible minimums of what constitutes fairness of exchange. To say, we sort of like apportion this, given the responsibility or given the power and the responsibility of people having these conversations. Because of course, someone juvenile coming and saying, hey, I don't like you, you are a madman for speaking, is different than someone who has a platform doing that. And
it's a bit different.
So it's like it has to be a balance of not censorship, but of interjecting in the conversation to say, we think this is not helpful for these and these and these reasons. We think this bastardizes the discourse because of what you have said here and here and here and here. Like, it's not enough. It's not for you to insult people to cause this. You have, at least I don't like to use this word, but I don't like using hierarchies, but at a higher level, we are having higher level discussions to hold themselves to a culture that will then trickle down. Because I think it's with politics, it's a thing of response. The people who support you will only engage in a way you endorse. And if consistently, because you can see, I'm Gisha Muntu, party of Ant, I love it because of how he is. And you kind of see how they contest their politics. There are things that are unimaginable to Ant, Alliance for Rational Transformation supporters. But for other political parties would be breakfast,
Sure.
So that thing is like,
they wake up to that. It's
so
their culture.
The intervention is to talk to the people who bear a certain responsibility in these conversations, to encourage a culture consistently and how they communicate, that does not call for censorship, but makes the environment healthy.
Healthy for
Yes.
even them to be engaged
Yes.
at a point in time when they have a
Yes.
problem. Maybe
Yeah,
as we
to
end
jump in.
this
Yes,
specific episode, your comments on rage farming and how you deal with the downside of radical partisanship, because I think you've had quite a number of weeks.
Yes, but you also spoke about something to do with free speech.
Oh, yes.
One of the best speeches I've heard about free speech is a speech given by Rowan Atkinson. A lot of people know him as Mr. Bean.
Yes.
Ironic, I think he was defending, he was pushing for a certain scrapping of a certain legislation in the UK. I think it was Title 5 or something ridiculous like that. The irony in a man who made his career by not speaking, being one of the biggest defenders of speech, is not lost on some of us. But I digress. He said that the best solution to offensive speech is more speech. You allow the contestation of ideas in the marketplace of ideas to thrive, and then eventually society will select which ideas come out on top. It's like organized chaos. Policing speech may not be the best way to go about this. But then back to your question of outrage farming. Social media has really democratized speech, at least to the people who can afford to have a smartphone and can pay for internet access. But what that has also meant is that we receive a lot of diverse opinions, and even things that shouldn't require argument will attract arguments based off of your perceived ideological and political leanings. You will have seemingly intelligent people becoming the biggest anti-vaxxers in the world. And they come from, and they will defend it, and they will have an army of defenders, and their opinions are not couched in the science, but they are couched in partisan bickering. Okay. Sadly, we cannot, as say, I come from a pharmaceutical background. I used to work in vaccine access. You cannot, if we allowed for popular opinion to determine how we intervene, say, on the vaccination front, not many people would be vaccinated. Now imagine a doctor who comes to the public square and chooses popularity over science. It's what we are seeing, the equivalent of that. Every day, it's what we've seen in the outrage farming environment that we've been in and we exist now. You have seemingly brilliant civil society players, seemingly brilliant academics choosing to play to the gallery just for dopamine hits, I suspect. They are not advancing intellectual discourse. There's a certain Ugandan...
And there's an unwillingness to offend.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah, there's an unwillingness to offend, which then makes conversations purely based off of lies. We are afraid to have what our friend Isaac calls naked conversations because we do not want to offend people. Now there's this thing that we are seeing lately where you have the stars of social media, the stars of activism, the stars of political discourse that have an army
behind them,
a mob behind them. Now the question is,
the correct word is horde.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. They have a horde behind them. Now the question: these are literal human brands. So when you're engaging with this person's submissions, are you engaging with it the way you would engage a brand. What happens if they are wrong? Do you challenge their ideas or do you challenge the brand? Because oftentimes the challenge of ideas will attract hordes of ridicule that are around defending the individual.
Rather than the idea for which they stand.
Rather than the idea for which they stand. Now, that has taken away the ability to contest ideas on their own merits. And that's sad.
To interject, I think Center for Policy Analysis, if they have the means, should look into functional illiteracy. Like, people can function, they can read basic arithmetic, but when it comes to ideas, like what he said is true. You see some people like abusing someone and even contradicting even their own ideas they're trying to defend. But please go ahead.
There's a professor. Is he a professor? This guy whose paper we recently read.
I think he's a postdoc. He's a postdoc. And I think he teaches.
He teaches in the US.
As we close,
as we close. He teaches in the US. And this guy has written a paper.
Brilliant.
A brilliant paper. We actually intend to discuss it publicly at Public Square and just show the contradiction. That paper seemed like a play-by-play approach that Public Square used in the response to the furor that happened following the March to Parliament thing. When you read that paper, it's 14, 18 pages? You would think the Public Square guys wrote it. And the guy was on the other side because of a mob. Every day he wakes up, American time, you wake up to whining from him, sobbing,
and he does not know
in clear contest, in clear conflict
of your own idea,
of his own
this
paper.
Is not just a Ugandan scenario;
it's global.
He's Ugandan, but he's now based in the US.
In the US.
He's teaching. He has written a brilliant paper on this.
What's the title of the paper in case the viewers?
We're removing a dictator.
We're removing a dictator.
Hashtag we're removing a dictator.
Bwesige.
By Bwesige. Okay.
You should read that paper, and then we have digital debris from his submissions on X during that period when Public Square and mainly myself were being roasted for our ideas. But the ideas, when you read our ideas, you read his submissions read his paper, he should agree with us almost 100%. He made these arguments. We had a similar situation now with the March to Parliament to what formed the basis of his paper.
His argument.
It's wild. It's like
when
schizophrenic.
they broke apart because of the pressure to have a clearly definable enemy who is popular to point at. But within the realm of ideas, we are meeting in the realm of ideas.
But then you can't talk or share coffee because
we are the bad guys. Yes, I guess
you're fighting on a different plane. You're like, guys, let's fight on the ideas, and someone is like, no, let's fight on personalities and political leanings. And you're like, no, that's not a discussion we want to have.
Okay. I think we have to stop this here, but that was quite an extensive discussion on non-partisanship and how and the pros and cons and the situation we find ourselves here. In the next episode, we're going to look at Frantz Fanon's theory on violence and its verification in liberated Mozambique. But
excited.
You can replace Mozambique by Uganda because we're going to try and contextualize that paper that President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni wrote in his dissertation at the University of Dar es Salaam in the 1970s. Stay tuned in for the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. For more podcasts, check out our Podbean and YouTube platforms. Thank you.